I also know that freedom is better than tyranny. But I also believe that a government that spies on its people and lies to its people is taking us on a trajectory toward tyranny and must be changed, and changed now.
Back to CPAC, our next guest spoke on a panel headlined, "Can Libertarians and Social Conservatives Get Along?" Arguably the two most different views under the right-of-center big tent. Matt Welch is editor-in-chief of Reason magazine and co-host of the new Fox business show, The Independents. He joins me now. Well, Matt, I mean, what do you think? Can this sort of battle royale meet together and you know, go apart, having crossed all the bows and dotted all the T's and so forth?
You know, I have a feeling that the two camps get along a lot more than people generally talk about, and then also a lot less at the same time. I think they assemble around similar issues and for similar reasons, just as they did during the Cold War, when there was sort of a natural alliance against communism. You know, a hardcore, super atheist libertarian would have his own reasons for hating communism, which is the good reason. It's terrible and it enslaves people. And a lot of social conservatives were great on that issue too, because they pointed out that this is a society that completely illegalized, criminalized religion and stifled this kind of expression. A lot of times I think social conservatives are canaries in the coal mine of freedom in a way, because they're more in tune with what is happening in terms of the expression of conscience and religious expression. So, for instance, in the opposition to Obamacare, I think a lot of libertarians have learned from social conservatives to be sensitive to areas that they wouldn't have ordinarily been sensitive, in terms of the government mandating people to act in ways that are contrary to their own conscience. But at the same time, there are real differences. There always have been. There always will be. It's interesting to watch now. Basically, they're a lot more united in opposition to a Democratic administration and its economic policies and a bunch of other things besides. But once the rubber hits the road of actual governance, that's when things tend to fall apart.
So I know Joint Chiefs of Staff Admiral McMullen said greatest threat to national security, the ballooning debt. When people from within the right-of-center camp sit down, do you think they'd sort of agree on maybe an issue like that? That's the single most worrisome issue, and okay, we're going to disagree on the gay marriage stuff, but I mean, that's okay because it's not as pressing?
Well, think about the rise of the Tea Party, like what happened and how who they were and what they did. Tea Party was composed of people who actually disagreed with one another about any number of things, but decided to focus basically on two main issues. One is the growth of government and government debt, and the other was Obamacare. Both are flip sides of the same coin, basically, the size and the growth and scope of government. And so tactically they said, okay, let's not even talk about foreign policy right now. Let's not talk about immigration right now. Some of this has changed over time, but at the beginning, let's just unite and take care of this. Let's cut government instead of just cutting taxes, which had been the Republican mantra. That is an amazing goal. I don't really care at the end of the day that these people and I might have different tastes in some social issues. As long as we're fighting on this issue together, I think that's all to the good. And furthermore, I think it speaks to where politics are going in this country, which is that people will gather, they'll swarm on individual shared interests. They'll be the best allies in the world on this, and then they'll say, okay, we're done with this, let's go on to the next one. Unfortunately, government spending is the one issue that you're never really done with, but tactical single-issue blocks, I think, are the future, and people on all sides of politics are beginning to understand that, and I think maybe even social conservatives and libertarians more than most, because they are minorities within their own kind of broad political trend.
Now, Matt, I know you've written recently that the future belongs to libertarians in terms of there being an upsurge. And I know on the ground, CPAC tends to go a bit more libertarian at the straw poll winners of who the presidential candidate should be have been Ron Paul in the past, Rand Paul. Do you think, though, that that's going to really move into pragmatic action in the years ahead? Or people are going to go, no, we got to clamp down on that old electability concept and bring in a George Bush, Mitt Romney guy who's sort of somewhere in the middle of it all?
I think two things. One is that we're very likely to have another kind of Mitt Romney, or the version in 2016 will be a Chris Christie, although not him, but or Scott Walker, or someone who, Paul Ryan even, that can seem to be palatable to an establishment. But at the same time, I think the real action is happening with people more like Rand Paul or Justin Amash or Thomas Massey or Mike Lee, Even one or two Democrats here, like Jared Polis in Colorado, he's pretty good on a bunch of stuff. That is where you see the energy and the passion coming from. And the GOP has a really serious problem here, right? We're 6 years into a really crappy presidency, economy and all of that. And yet Republicans are at an all-time low in terms of Americans' self-identification with their brand. It's down to 25%, which is just astonishing that they haven't been able to pick up just the boomerang effect, right? So it speaks to specifically their inability to reach out to young people. Why do young people not like Republicans? Because Republicans for them are seen to be hostile to gays, to immigrants, to anyone who isn't an old white guy. You know, some of that's unfair, some of that's fair, or at least you understand where it's coming from, and they need to change something to make that happen. I would think that you need to go much more in a kind of federalist way, kind of outreach, tolerance, more things that, and also be a different brand. I mean, I've always tell social cons, they're always afraid that I'm going to tell them that they need to start legalizing heroin. I'm like, no, just play defense. You know, that's an attractive message to send to people that, hey, look, diversity, real tolerance is tolerating people with different viewpoints, with different faiths, and reducing the size of government so it doesn't offend anyone, right? And so I think that there's an attractive message there, but the Republican Party is scared of it. Just like Mitt Romney was scared to talk about cutting entitlements or the military or anything else like that. They are terrified of actually saying we are totally different than the Democrats on basic fundamental issues of liberty and of reducing the size and scope of government. I think that could go a long way towards reaching out to young people, but something has to, and that something can't be the same thing that Republicans have been doing for the last generation.
So whether you're libertarian or social conservative, I mean, how do you win in terms of articulating the message? Because the main problem with Mitt Romney's 47% comment is I think he actually got the number a little bit low when he said it. It's actually a bit higher than that, but he turtled and he sort of apologized for it, even though you'd think that would be his core values, you know, turning people from the takers into the makers and owning it.
Yeah, I think that message is a real loser, and not necessarily because of you know, that it's wrong to point out that, you know, you get a docile populace when you dose them constantly with money. It was wrong in terms of assuming that people have no free will, that economic determinism, you know, or you know, government determinism will tell how someone's going to vote. That's rude. That's rude in any language, in any blog. If you just say that this group of people is destined to vote for these other people because of reasons that I don't find valid, you're not going to win them and you're not going to deserve to. You need to be able to say, look, I have an opportunity program here. You need to articulate that message, which is a good one. And someone like Marco Rubio does an excellent job of articulating that particular message. But you can't just consign people to categories in which you say that they will obviously all act in one certain way and vote one certain way. That's kind of a death. And it also elides the fact that a lot of people who are getting the biggest dollops of government money vote Republican, and they're old and white, you know? So I don't think that was a winner for Romney. I think you do need to stand firm to core values, but one of the things about Romney is that he never did. He was so scared to mention if he would cut even a sub-department in the Department of Education, any small agency. He never wanted to articulate any of that. He ran scared of those types of things, and for a Republican to catch people's imagination, they're going to have to go in a different direction.
Matt Welch, thanks so much for your analysis, and enjoy the conference this weekend.